You still have that gloomy look on your face. Wait, are you still single and living with Dad? That's hilarious. It was a holiday when the doorbell rang, and standing at the front door was my younger sister who once stole my husband. 2 years ago, I discovered her affair with my husband, leading to our divorce. Since then, I had lost track of both of them, but suddenly, my sister returned, ridiculing my appearance and flaunting her wedding ring. We got married, so I thought I'd stop by for a greeting. I'm living happily now with your ex-husband. My name is Zoe. Ever since I was young, I've been complex about my appearance. My face and body are average, with no distinctive features. To others, I'm just ordinary, but I have a beautiful younger sister, Sophia. Ever since we were young, I've been constantly compared to Sophia, who is 5 years younger than me, in terms of appearance. Relatives would often comment behind my back, Sophia is so pretty, and Zoe is so plain. Are they really sisters? I accidentally overheard them saying such things. Sophia always looked down on me, knowing how the relatives talked about me. She was selfish, believing she was superior to me, her older sister, so it was common for her to beg for my things or just take them if I refused. That's why living together in our family home often left me with unpleasant feelings. However, my parents always treated us sisters equally, regardless of our looks. They showered me with love, never minding the relatives' mean comments, which made me adore them. Although my parents always shielded me from the hurtful words of our relatives, things were different at school. There, I couldn't escape the harsh comparisons. At school, I was constantly compared to Sophia, a cute younger sister and a plain elder sister. Facing these comparisons often, I resolved to excel in studies, knowing I couldn't compete in looks. Thanks to that, I kept my grades at the top of my class. Especially in Spanish, I excelled. My parents praised me a lot every time I scored well on a test. Tragically, my mother passed away in an accident when I was 17. After grieving, I began to do the household chores in place of my mother. However, Sophia hardly seemed to mourn our mother's death and started treating me like a servant. Sophia would always wait until our father was away on business to act up. At this time, she had just entered middle school. She would order me to buy snacks and drinks, treating me like her errand girl, and sometimes even demanded money. My allowance is so little every month. You're not interested in fashion or anything, and you don't buy stuff, so it wouldn't hurt to lend me some, Sophia would complain. Reluctantly lending her money, I never saw it returned even once. Seeing her become more demanding than ever, I realized I needed to leave home to escape being exploited. Determined, I studied hard and got into the university of my choice. I started living alone when I enrolled, and after 4 peaceful years, I landed a job at a major multinational corporation. My Spanish proficiency, already a strength, improved further at this company. Despite the challenges, I found fulfillment in my work, dedicating myself to it for 5 years. Then, a younger male colleague, who joined the company that year, suddenly confessed his feelings to me. Actually, I've been attracted to you since I first saw you, Zoe. Would you go out with me? He asked one day after work. This colleague, Joseph, who was 5 years younger than me, would later become my husband. Why me? Is this some kind of joke? I was more perplexed than happy when he confessed. After all, Joseph was quite handsome and popular in the office. Despite the fact that there were many more beautiful employees at the company than me, Joseph chose to confess to me, someone with a plain appearance. I couldn't help but suspect that he might just be playing around, though I felt sorry for doubting him. But Joseph looked at me earnestly and continued. I've always admired how hard you work and how well you take care of your juniors. I find your dedication and kindness really attractive. I was surprised to hear this from Joseph, someone I had hardly spoken to before. I never expected someone like him, who seemed to have it all, to notice someone like me. Truthfully, until Joseph confessed, I hadn't paid him any special attention. Even as other female colleagues whispered, "He's so handsome," to me, Joseph seemed like a distant figure, probably experienced with women. However, his sincere demeanor at that moment deeply moved me. When I bashfully looked down and replied, "If you're okay with someone like me, then yes," I still clearly remember his delighted smile when I looked up. I had virtually no experience dating men. In high school, I was constantly compared to Sophia, so love was out of the question. In college, a brief relationship ended with the guy calling me dull and plain, and breaking it off unilaterally. So, when I started dating someone as attractive as Joseph, I was ecstatic. Later, we moved in together and our relationship flourished. Joseph even visited my father a few times a year. My father was overjoyed that I had a boyfriend. Joseph seriously told him, "I want to marry Zoe someday," and I was thrilled by his feelings. 3 years later, we married. I was 30 and Joseph was 25. Our colleagues warmly congratulated us on our marriage, and I felt on top of the world. Joseph transferred departments after our marriage, but we both continued to work hard. After registering our marriage, we went to visit my father to formally introduce Joseph as my husband. My father was happy about our marriage, but I hadn't told Sophia about it. She might have learned from my father, but she never contacted me. I know her contact information, but since moving out, we hadn't been in touch, and I avoided seeing her when visiting home. Sophia still lives there. Having repeated a year in high school and 2 years in college, and is set to graduate this year. We carefully planned this visit to avoid meeting her. While my father, Joseph, and I were chatting amicably, the sound of the front door opening interrupted us, followed by a familiar voice saying, "I'm home." I was taken aback and froze. Sophia, as I feared, was the one who walked into the living room. "What's up, Sophia? You're home early today," my father greeted her. "My plans got cancelled, so I came back." "Wait, who's this guy? He's pretty handsome," Sophia said, ignoring me and ogling Joseph after explaining her cancelled plans. Uncomfortably watching my husband being appraised, I wanted to ask her to stop, but Joseph, seeing my sister suddenly appear, lit up and said with a smile, "Nice to meet you, I'm Zoe's husband, Joseph." Joseph stood up and walked over to Sophia with a smile. My husband, obviously smitten, and my sister, introducing herself with a not-so-displeased attitude. I felt an unpleasant premonition as she glanced at me and smirked. "I heard from Dad you got married, but I had no idea your husband was so handsome. You, being so plain, are quite lucky, aren't you?" "Sophia, that's not a nice thing to say." My father immediately reprimanded Sophia, but she seemed unaffected. Instead, she leaned on Joseph's arm and asked flirtatiously, "How old are you, Joseph? What do you like to do on your days off?" She looked up at him with a coquettish voice. Joseph didn't seem to mind and continued the conversation closely, leaving me at a loss for what to do. "Sophia, that's enough." When I was too upset to be angry, feeling a vague sense of anxiety that almost made me cry, my father strongly scolded Sophia. Relieved inside, I watched as Sophia glared at me and then, looking dissatisfied, moved away from Joseph and left the living room. After that, the conversation with my father didn't go well, and we decided to go home. However, just as we were about to exit the front door, Sophia, who was supposed to have gone to her room, came back and cozied up to Joseph again. As Sophia said, "Joseph, come visit again," and quickly moved away from him, I couldn't shake off a bad feeling. This was because, throughout his conversation with Sophia, Joseph looked very pleased, with a smug expression on his face. It was clear to me that he was captivated by the beauty of Sophia. Back home, I noticed a significant change in Joseph's behavior. He started carrying his phone everywhere, even to the bathroom, never letting it out of his sight. "What's going on lately? Are you expecting a call from someone?" I asked, puzzled by his behavior. But Joseph just brushed me off irritably, saying, "It's none of your business, stop nagging." His attitude towards me had grown cold. Conversation had dwindled, and increasingly he would leave home alone on weekends, returning either late at night or the next morning. When I asked where he had been, he always evaded the question. I didn't want to doubt Joseph too much, but as these incidents kept happening frequently, my mistrust only grew. Then, one day, I had to go on a business trip and leave the house for several days. The trip was supposed to last 3 days, but I finished work half a day early and managed to return home on the second night. I had emailed Joseph beforehand, but there was no reply when I reached home. Thinking he might have missed my message, I didn't worry too much and opened the front door. To my surprise, I found a pair of unfamiliar women's high heels discarded in the entrance. The instant sight of them triggered the same uneasy feeling I had when Joseph first met Sophia. Joseph was nowhere to be seen in the living room. But I heard voices coming from the bedroom. As I slowly opened the closed door, I was met with a shocking scene. There they were, Joseph and Sophia, entwined in each other's arms, completely undressed. "What are you two doing?" I managed to utter, my thoughts nearly freezing in shock. What's up? Weren't you supposed to come back tomorrow? It seemed Joseph hadn't checked his smartphone after all. He complained without any sign of remorse while getting dressed. He must have ignored my messages. Ugh, we were at a good part. You've always been so clueless. Sophia said irritably, getting dressed as well. Sophia, what is this? This is cheating. I confronted her in a rage, but Sophia just sneered dismissively. What's the problem? Joseph and I agreed on this. He said he prefers me over someone plain like you, she boasted, snuggling up to Joseph. Joseph, looking content, stroked Sophia's hair, completely ignoring me, his wife. Watching them, my anger rapidly cooled, replaced by a fading of love for Joseph. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and started using it. Hey, darling, have you been distant lately and glued to your phone because you've been in touch with Sophia? I asked calmly. Joseph finally looked at me and snorted. Yeah, Sophia's beautiful and charming, unlike you. Poor Sophia, having an ugly sister like you. He mocked, praising Sophia. It turned out that during our last visit to my father's house, Joseph had taken an instant liking to Sophia. Sophia seemed to feel the same. When we were leaving and she came to see us off, she stealthily slipped a note with her contact information into Joseph's pocket. Joseph openly bragged about how he started the relationship with Sophia by responding to the contact details she left for him. Furthermore, he hurled insults at me, saying, I only married you because I knew about your achievements and thought you'd make a good wallet. Otherwise, who would want to be with someone as ugly as you? Hearing this, my vision nearly went dark. His words plunged me into darkness. His sincere demeanor when he confessed to me was just a lie to deceive me. Holding back tears, I hurriedly called my father to report what Sophia and Joseph had done. My father arrived promptly, saw them together, and shouted, What foolishness is this? Sophia showed no remorse, even as our father scolded them. Joseph shamelessly admitted, I'm sorry, but I've fallen in love with Sophia. Disappointed, my father sighed deeply. Enough, Sophia. I disown you. I've overlooked your selfishness until now, but not anymore. Don't expect any help with job hunting or come back home, he said sternly. Unmoved, Sophia retorted. Fine. I'll be happy with Joseph anyway. Not a single word of apology to our father, despite being raised by him until today. My disgust towards her grew. I glared at them both, reached my limit, and declared. Fine, do as you please, Joseph. I want a divorce. Good riddance. Don't ever show me your ugly face again. I was so over Joseph's insults they didn't even register anymore. The thought of having spent even a moment married to someone like him seemed utterly foolish to me. After I told Joseph about the divorce, I left him and them behind and moved out of our apartment that very day. I moved back home and quit my job, but thanks to my father, I quickly found a new one. He works at a foreign-owned company similar to the one I had been at. And he used his high position there to talk to the president about hiring me. They were recruiting at the time, and I was able to join them. By the time my divorce was finalized, it seemed that Joseph had quit his job and moved away with Sophia, but I had no idea of their whereabouts. I settled into a peaceful life with my father and adjusted well to my new job. 2 years had passed since then. I had nearly forgotten about Joseph and Sophia when something completely unexpected happened. One day, a day off from work, the doorbell rang while I was doing housework. When I opened the door, there stood Joseph and Sophia, whom I hadn't heard from in so long. At the sight of me, they both smirked condescendingly. Hey, ugly, how have you been? Joseph said to me, catching me off guard with their sudden visit. You still have that plain look on your face. Seriously, are you still single and living with Dad? That's hilarious. Sophia snickered. What are you doing here? I asked wearily. Sophia flaunted her left hand, where a ring glinted on her finger. And Joseph wore a matching one. We got married, so we thought we should at least greet Dad once. Now, Joseph and I are living happily together. I could hardly believe they had the nerve to say such things to an ex-wife. I wanted to shut the door in their faces, but they pushed past me and barged into the house. Move it, ugly, is your dad home? Joseph deliberately bumped into my shoulder and brazenly crossed the threshold of the house. Sophia, who was supposed to be disowned by my father, appeared with an arrogant attitude, as if she had forgotten all about it. Then, hearing the commotion, my father emerged from the back of the house. Initially surprised to see Sophia and Joseph, he quickly put on a smile. "Oh, isn't that Sophia? And Joseph is with you too? You've come back at just the right time. I have something to discuss with both of you, come over here." Encouraged by my father's reaction, Sophia and Joseph seemed pleased and lightly headed towards the living room, so I followed them. As they casually sat down on the house's sofa, my father handed them some documents. They took them without suspicion, but as soon as they saw the contents, their expressions froze. It was a demand for compensation for infidelity against me. "What's this? Dad, what does this mean?" Father, now with a stern face, glared at them sharply, a stark contrast to his earlier smile. "What does this mean? I never forgave you for what you did to Zoe. I couldn't do anything as I had no way of contacting you, but now that you've returned, I'll make sure to claim the compensation." Sweating, Sophia and Joseph fell silent in front of my determined father. At the time, Zoe had gathered photos and audio recordings of you two in the act of infidelity, so we have all the evidence we need. There's no escaping this. Faced with my father's relentless inquiry, Sophia and Joseph fell silent. 2 years ago, when I first witnessed their affair, I had secretly recorded the audio on my phone and took silent pictures. I still have those data on my phone, ready to present as evidence of their affair at any time. "There's no way we can pay such a huge amount," Joseph said in despair. However, my father's expression softened as he said, "Actually, there's one more thing I need to discuss with you." He then pulled out some more documents from a drawer and handed them to Sophia and Joseph. I already knew this, but the documents they were signing were for the transfer of this family home as a gift. My father proposed to give them the house as a gift inter vivos. As expected, both of them immediately lit up at the proposal. "So, you're giving us this house? Why didn't you say so earlier? Then, we can sell this house to pay off the alimony." It was clear they were only thinking about selling the family home for money. They seemed desperate for cash, eager to grab this lucrative opportunity, and started signing the documents without hesitation. "Poor you, living with Dad and getting nothing." Sophia mocked me after signing. She seemed to think I was getting nothing from our father. As I remained silent, they prepared to leave, thinking their business was done. "See you later, Dad. You two better pay Zoe her alimony soon," my father sternly reminded. Joseph replied nonchalantly, "Understood. Thank you for giving us your house." I watched the two leave, still mocking me, in high spirits. After they left, my father looked at me, nodding and smiling. I nodded back and started packing for a particular reason. Actually, my father and I had already planned to move out of this house soon. When Sophia and Joseph appeared, it was perfect timing for my father to propose the gift inter vivos. After we left, they tried to sell the house quickly, but it was old and significantly deteriorated. I know this because they called once about it. "You really had the nerve to stick us with such a rundown house, it's not even worth any money." As soon as the call connected, Sophia was fuming, but I had no intention of taking her seriously. "You were the ones who happily signed the contract, I don't know anything about the money. All I care about is getting my alimony." "No way!" I ignored Sophia's dismay and hung up the phone. In the end, selling the house didn't come close to covering the alimony, and it seemed Sophia and Joseph ended up in debt, working tirelessly every day. Joseph had already switched jobs, but his salary was lower than at his previous company, making their life more difficult. Furthermore, Sophia, who had lived off her parents' and Joseph's earnings until now, had never worked a day in her life. So, she was reportedly struggling a lot with the unfamiliar work life at the company she managed to get hired at. One day, as they were burdened with a hefty debt, my sister and her husband called me again. However, I was on a plane with my father at the time and had turned off my smartphone, so I didn't notice the call. We were on an international flight, out of range for over half a day. After getting off the plane and checking my smartphone, there were dozens of texts from Sophia and Joseph, demanding a redo of the gift inter vivos. How selfish can they get? We've already received the alimony, and I have no intention of getting involved with those two anymore, my father muttered, apparently having received a ton of texts as well. He started deleting all of them, clearly annoyed. I too wanted nothing more to do with them. After all, we were overseas now, unlikely to meet them again. From then on, I blocked their calls and contact details, cutting off any communication from Sophia and her husband. In fact, my father and I had decided to live overseas from now on. And now, I'm remarried, and my husband was with me on the plane. I met my husband through a company I joined, thanks to my father's arrangement. He was an expat employee from abroad, drawn to my intelligence and thoughtfulness. He approached me, and soon after, we got married. Recently, my company launched an overseas expansion project, and with my ability to speak Spanish, my husband, my father, and I relocated abroad as a team of 3. Thanks to my husband, a local resident, we were able to purchase a luxurious detached house. Since moving into our new home, I've completely forgotten about the unpleasant experiences back in the US. Now, I'm living freely and working hard in this new land. Together with my husband and father, I find great fulfillment in our overseas project and am thoroughly enjoying our new life. On weekends, we visit beautiful sceneries, living happily as a family of 3.